It's been a while, and it's been hard. Hard to accept that Game of Thrones ended the way it did. But now I find myself rewatching the series to enjoy what up to a point is really f***ing good TV. This time, prepared for what's to come. And I still find myself surprised. I knew that Season 8 was a complete dumpster fire. I knew that Season 7 was weird and bad. I knew that Season 6 had some questionable moments, but while rewatching, already at Season 5 did I realize that this was where things really started going downhill. Seasons 1 to 4 is where the series does exactly what it's supposed to. It adapts the books to TV to the best of its ability. It's always reassuring when they choose to adapt a book series into a TV series rather than a movie, as it allows for more thorough storytelling. The cherry on the cake was how the producers had to figure out who Jon Snow's mother was to even get the job in the first place. The show did a good job of staying true to the books, and hell, some of the changes they made from the books actually worked out for the better. Like the scenes with Arya and Tywin at Harrenhal, or getting to experience Robb Stark's romance with his wife to serve as build-up to their dramatic demise. Season 1 uses a big reunion followed by a murder mystery to kick things off, much like the books. As plotlines diverge, we're gradually introduced to the world of Ice and Fire, and the show feeds us constant reminders of past events and clues to keep in mind for future reference. The storytelling is efficient and compelling, and the show labels itself as groundbreaking when they kill off the very main protagonist inside the first season. In Season 2, they scale things up with the War of the Five Kings, plotlines keep diverging, and we get to enjoy sophisticated intrigues and great dialogue. And in Season 3, the Red Wedding comes as another groundbreaking moment, leaving us all shocked and marveling at the same time. The only problem with the series at this point is how no one can be bothered to wear a damn hat even though it's freezing balls outside. Ironically, it's because they did such a thorough job from early on and took the series to such heights that it eventually falls so hard when things start to go south in the latter half of the series. Season 4 was such a memorable season with some of the show's best scenes and biggest plot twists. Subverting our expectations after the Red Wedding would be hard, but somehow they did it again. The timing of Joffrey's death and the fight between Oberyn and the Mountain were incredibly intense and unexpected. Everyone loves Season 4, so I'm not going to stick my neck so far out as to say that the downfall started here, but this is the season where dialogue starts getting a little bit more accessible to most viewers, let's say. Perhaps you remember how in previous seasons, whenever you watched the show as someone who hadn't seen it before, you paused at every other scene to underline how important the conversation is to remember in the future. From Season 4 onwards, there's no more of that, apart from Oberyn's arc, of course, but that also gets resolved before the season ends anyway. All was well and good until that one thing that should have never happened happened. The show caught up with the published books, which is what happened in Season 5. In retrospect, it would be easy to draw the conclusion that the brilliance of the show came down entirely to the brilliance of the books, but that's not exactly right. I mean, take Olenna Tyrell subtly murdering Joffrey right in front of our eyes, for example. A great bit of subtlety and rewatch value right there. Season 5 introduces one of the coolest plotlines in the High Sparrow, who is raised to prominence by Cersei, a move that will come back and bite her in the ass, but not really. But I'll get back to that in a bit. The dialogue in this season sees a significant drop in quality, but the biggest issue with Season 5 is the insignificance of its events. Barristan Selmy gets killed off for no other reason than slimming down the cast to make room for new characters. And the build-up to action is really shallow compared to the early seasons, where fighting scenes were the result of astutely accumulated tension. Other examples of this include Jaime's trip to Dorne, where all the sneaking around and fighting turned out to be for nothing and had no consequences to him whatsoever, as well as Stannis getting fucked over by both Literal and Ramsay Snow, in a long-expected battle that provided neither subverted expectations nor drama. And okay, the sacrificing of Princess Shireen was a clear Game of Thrones classic. The scene itself is just amazingly horrifying, and is in itself by far the highlight of the season. The fact that her sacrifice is in vain in the end adds salt to the wound, but they miss the opportunity to push the theory of her sacrifice being the death that pays for the resurrection of Jon Snow in Season 6, which would have given her death meaning and made the whole thing a lot more epic. We're introduced to the Waif and the Sand Snakes, who are portrayed very differently from the books. Portraying characters differently from the books was never really a problem up to this point, but they portray the Waif as this passionate, bloodthirsty killer, despite supposedly being no one. And they removed all the exciting intrigues going on with the Sand Snakes and replaced it with cringy, edgy pussy. Another big mistake was portraying the Waif as an antagonist from the start, as her eventual mission to kill Arya for desertion, which has yet to happen in the books, would be much more powerful if there was a conflicting friendship in the mix. In the books, the Waif teaches Arya a bunch of things, including the Braavosi language, which makes sense since they are in Braavos. But in the show, everyone in Braavos seems to speak the common tongue for some reason.
Very nice. Give me 4 with vinegar.
Seems odd, especially since the show has done its due diligence previously with other languages. I bring this up because, after shallow build-up to action, this insensitivity to cultural differences is one of the major steps the show takes towards becoming a whitewashed, mainstream piece of shit. After having caught up with Stannis on the battlefield outside of Winterfell, Brienne does that thing where you see her furiously strike at the opponent. But we don't get to see whether she actually does kill Stannis or if she showed mercy in the end, leaving us viewers in the dark, kind of like how Jon did with Ygritte, with the difference being that they never actually give us the answer this time, as if the writers hadn't made up their mind about whether Stannis should actually live or die, leaving that decision for next season, making it arguably the most awkward exit of any character in the series. These are just of the few major inconsistencies to pop up well before Season 8. And don't even get me started on Hardhome. It fulfills its purpose, and it was really cool watching it the first time, I guess, but upon closer inspection, it's almost as flawed as the Long Night in Season 8. Then there's Tyrion. My god, Tyrion.
Look how they mess with my boy.
Tyrion's dialogue alone was one of the pillars of this once great show. But Season 5 is where Tyrion goes from verbal serial murder to unconvincing and lame. Fast forward to Season 6, and Tyrion's scenes consist almost entirely of small-talk and cock jokes. That's not even an exaggeration.
Because you have no cock. If I lost my cock, I'd drink all the time.
I don't think a cock is a true qualification, as I'm sure you'd agree.
Cocks are important, I'm afraid.
At least your balls won't freeze off.
Gone were the days of the child abuse and verbal annihilation we'd come to love so much, and come were the days of...
Because I have balls, and you don't.
Varys has a lot going on throughout the show, just like in the books. Until Season 6, where he joins Daenerys' crew and his purpose dwindles dramatically. He used to be Littlefinger's biggest rival in the Cold War they waged against each other, but all that goes out the window and the Great Master of Whispers degenerates into little more than a messenger for Daenerys and a wall for Tyrion to bounce his eunuch jokes against. Season 6 is the season where all resemblance of past glory really starts to wear off. Choices and events start to make less and less sense, and a lot of dialogue is just outright filler, as if the producers were buying time for George to publish the next damn book already so that they didn't have to do as much actual writing themselves. The laws of physics start getting increasingly ignored as Sansa and Theon and later Jon Snow all somehow survive freezing cold weather after taking a dip in ice-cold water, and Ramsay's hounds disappearing into thin air, for example. All this suffering and uncertainty has clearly had a humbling effect on Sansa, but nevertheless, she is pretty much as naive and stupid as ever, but with her new experiences of the real world, she now has a lot of confidence. So much, in fact, that she makes the common mistake of thinking that being the victim of something makes you an expert in that. And okay, on her journey there and back again, she has now seen some things, and with the death of her parents, she is now a player in the Game of Thrones. But instead of writing a book about it, all she really does is invent problems for no other reason than to cause drama.
Did it ever once occur to you that I might have some insight?
What should I do differently?
I don't know anything about battles. Just don't do what he wants you to do.
Oh, that's good advice.
In Season 7, Arya and Daenerys pick up this habit as well, and considering the show's agenda of making points about female empowerment, this seems really counterproductive. Lots of scenes would have been really cool and impactful if they hadn't been undermined by their unrealistic execution, such as Bran being touched by the Night King, but instead of urging them to escape, the three-eyed raven heads straight into another unproductive vision when they know the Night King is coming, severely delaying their escape. The Red Priestess Kinvara getting a big introduction only to never play a part in the story or be seen ever again. Daenerys burning down the cults in the hut in Vaes Dothrak, where regular embers act like wildfire. You're almost surprised they didn't get Michael Bain to blow the place up at the end. Arya getting fatally stabbed, surviving, running around and then fighting before having had time to recover. Sansa meeting with Littlefinger in secret and refusing his military assistance against the Boltons, then lying about it to Jon only to go back and ask for Littlefinger's help anyway, again without telling Jon. Also that the Knights of the Whale can swoop in and save the day like the Riders of Rohan. But hey, this ain't that kind of video, so we won't go into all of that now.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Season 6 is where Game of Thrones really fell off a cliff. I mean, shit. They didn't even waste a breath on Rickon's funeral after the Battle of the Bastards. Another indication of how the producers started to kind of forget about what happened previously in the show, I guess. Oh, and remember the tension between the small folk and the establishment they spent 2 seasons building up to? All of that went up in smoke when Cersei blew up the Sept of Baelor, completely void of consequence to her. They even made her queen for it. Compare this to when Joffrey was attacked in the streets in Season 2 due to not making sure his people were fed. This scene alone made the world of Thrones a lot more dynamic and immersive, and it contributed to its unpredictability. But by Season 6, this has all been completely stripped away. On the topic of abrupt endings to plotlines, Arya finally deserts from the Faceless Men, and after counter-killing the Waif for trying to kill her, Jaqen is cool with it and lets it slide, and the reasons Arya needed to die for are now void. Even though she's totally leaving with all the secrets, skills, and faces she now possesses. And so she's free to go because what? She proved herself by killing her former colleague? I mean, is it just me, or shouldn't they be all over her for this? A much better approach would have been to have Arya return to the House of Black and White wearing the Waif's face and successfully lying to Jaqen to prove herself. This would at least have given Arya a realistic head start for if and when the Faceless Men figure things out and decide to come after her. And it would have given Jaqen a reason to show up at Winterfell and then join the fight against the Night King, and maybe even sacrifice himself to save Arya at some point, and in so doing paying the debt she owes the Red God, going full circle that way. But yeah, from one disappointing ending to another. There was something in Season 6 that I didn't realize until now, and it's this comment from Dario.
You weren't made to sit on a chair in a palace.
What was I made for?
You're a conqueror, Daenerys Stormborn.
So, this actually serves as the first step in Daenerys' eventual descent into madness. However, it also proves that this was the true beginning of the end. They planted the Mad Queen seed already in Season 6. Now, don't get me wrong, this obviously doesn't count as a seed planted well. They almost got the ball rolling with multiple scenes of talking about crushing her enemies no matter the cost and so on. But the build-up to the extreme ending definitely isn't there. Yeah, you got Daenerys crucifying and burning the Meereenese nobles, but she always realized her mistakes and made good on them by going the diplomatic road in the end, working towards her expressed goal of being a righteous ruler and not being Queen of the Ashes. And yeah, you got the burning of the Tarlys, but Randall Tarly was given a choice and he made it. Why Dickon chose to go down though, despite being the sole heir to his house, is a different story. And so for at least 5 years the producers were planning all this shit, but rather than giving us a compelling descent into madness, they gave us all talky talk and no walky walk. That and a few determined looks, I guess. Some might still argue that this is evidence that she was going mad, but put it this way. Would you have been able to predict her decision to massacre a whole city after the battle was won based on the scenes leading up to it? Of course not. Season 7 then, which is basically a warm-up for the complete shit show to come. As if they hadn't already, this is the season where they really start to insult the intelligence of the audience.
Enough with the clever plans.
The script gets even more hollowed out as people start having unrealistic disagreements over just about anything in order to cause drama. Dialogue in general becomes more and more sitcom-like, with conversations starting and ending at unnatural places.
You are my sister, but I am king now.
Or things being communicated without having to say anything at all. The only truly good scene in Season 7 is Olenna Tyrell's death, where she confesses to murdering Joffrey. So thank you very much for that, but unfortunately the rest is garbage. In this season, we find ourselves with loads of things needing to happen, crammed into an unnecessarily short space of time. They only gave it 7 episodes after all, and they used that time jacking themselves off with cameos of Ed Sheeran and that dreadful fake rivalry between Sansa and Arya. So how did they get around these unholy tight time restraints, you may ask? Why, they invented teleportation, of course. Remember how they actually used to take the time to show people traveling, taking breaks and all?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
With teleportation, there's no need for great dialogue to justify the scenes spent on the road. No need for character building or adventures. No, with teleportation we can jump straight to whatever conclusions we want, regardless of what events may or may not lead up to them. What makes the need for teleportation stand out even more is, of course, that by this point of the series, everyone has the means of transportation and the survival skills they need to travel effectively, especially Daenerys with her 3 fully grown, fully operational, fully flying dragons that she could use to travel and to swiftly destroy her enemies without much bloodshed. But for some ambiguous reason, it just doesn't work that way, and the dragons don't make the realistic impact. Instead, they sit around just about long enough for Daenerys to lose enough resources and allies to even out the playing field before finally going out, only to do the thing she's spent so long and paid so dearly to avoid: annihilating people. Bran has completed his transformation into an all-knowing oracle, and yet he doesn't provide jack shit in terms of helping out in the fight against the White Walkers. Not even so much as warging in a few animals to be slaughtered for food, since they're all about to starve in the coming winter, the little shit. Also, wouldn't it have been a lot more realistic if, instead of Daenerys, Bran is the one taking the dragons beyond the wall to rescue Jon and the others? Wouldn't it have been so much more intriguing if Bran was the one who lost a dragon to the Night King? Imagine, they could have even squeezed in some actual substance to the friction between Daenerys and Sansa in Season 8, and some goddamn meaning to the whole rivalry between the Night King and the Three-Eyed Raven. And I mean, Bran knowing where the boys beyond the wall were at would actually have made sense to begin with, and all the bullshit with teleporting Gendry, that Raven, and Daenerys back and forth halfway across the continent wouldn't even be an issue. But I guess Bran actually being of any use is too much to ask. The dismissal of now redundant characters becomes a pressing issue in Season 7, as some of them don't have anything left to offer the story. And let me undermine what a big deal this is by comparing this to previous killings of characters. See, in the good old days, viewers were left shocked and wondering what the hell will happen now, simply because the characters that died had so much to live for. In Season 7, it comes as no surprise when characters like the Freys and Littlefinger get killed off, because they're just dead weight at this point. And dearie me, Peter Baelish, one of the most important characters, the one that kicked off pretty much every conflict in the span of the series, and by far the biggest mover and shaker in the Seven Kingdoms. He should have had an entire episode 9 dedicated to him, but no. He got an awkwardly unfair trial after an even more awkward and predictable fake intrigue between Sansa and Arya. Jesus Christ, this was such a poor attempt at subverting expectations. I mean, look, there was basically 2 things that could possibly happen within this kind of setup. A, Sansa is now a greedy bitch who wants to usurp Jon, who was chosen to be king, to snag what would be a divided north right before the White Walkers show up. No, she's no match against her sister, who has superpowers now, And there's clearly no time for that anyway, so it has to be B. Peter f***ing Baelish, arguably the most intelligent character in the entire series, falls for a trick so transparent light f***ing accelerates through it, leaving him at the mercy of people who have every reason to want him dead anyway. The intrigue between Sansa and Arya never meant anything. It was a complete conflict of both their characters from the start, and neither stood to gain anything from antagonizing the other. The writers really wanted to have the cake and eat it too on this one, f***ing morons. Meanwhile, Tyrion's character gets further annihilated as he unconvincingly fails at everything he's supposed to be good at, and slowly becomes the pushover he was never meant to be. I suppose this was meant to underline the increasing authority and ruthlessness of Daenerys, but allowing Tyrion to be flattened by her at every turn really takes the bite out of their conflicts. So much squandered potential here. I mean, look, all they had to do was give both characters compelling points of view to argue for. Tyrion convinces Daenerys to do what? Not burn down all of King's Landing in order to kill Cersei? Wow, tough sell, especially considering they could just literally fly up a dragon and pluck her from the window she's constantly staring out of. Or, defeat her army in the field and leave the citizens of King's Landing the f*** alone once the battle is won. If both their arguments had actually had some substance and genuine back and forth to them, Tyrion's outmaneuvering of Daenerys would have made things a lot more convincing, and when he actually failed at things, it would have been so much more compelling. Then finally, as if it weren't bad enough, Season 8, the shit cherry on the crab cake, not only takes an additional year to produce, but subverts all expectations in terms of how low one can actually go. Well over half of all dialogue is filler at this point, and nothing makes any damn sense anymore. I'm not gonna go over everything that went wrong in Season 8, but link in the description to a video where I do. The true downfall of Game of Thrones didn't begin in Season 8, or in Season 7 for that matter. It began well before that. It didn't have to be this way though, and according to George R.R. Martin himself...
We could have gone to 11, 12, 13 seasons, but I guess they wanted a life.
You wanted it to keep going.
Well, if you've read my novels, you know there was enough material for more seasons.
It's strange to think that half the series was spent being amazing and then the other half really, really bad. After Season 4, the series becomes more and more predictable and shallow. Watching it all in one go, without years of intermission, the differences between season to season become very clear. And it's staggering all over again how they could fail so badly at something they previously had been so very good at. Do you agree with what I said in this video? Did I miss something? Please let me know in the comments, and if you like heartfelt content like this, consider liking and subscribing. And as always, consider supporting your creators. There's a link in the description if you feel like supporting me. Large or small, your support makes a difference, and I thank you all for watching.